Hello, how you doing? It's day 168 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tomlin Nyback. We're here talking about black issues in America, wondering how we get along, if we're growing, regressing, progressing, um, all these things going on in black culture in black America. We are finding out uh, who we really are in a culture created by whites, European whites, for whites, administered by whites. Where does the black skin color come in to that equation? Where do we rate? History shows us a strong historical precedent for our position in America, a couple hundred years worth. You know, our relationship with this country predates the official creation of this nation. I think that's very important to think about when we give our arguments for or against um, the success or failure of black life in America. Very important. Two thoughts emerge as I continue the project here. Day 168 is for the black mind. Is the black mind still that conditioned slave entity that was oppressed and burdened, formed through those few centuries of American slavery? I mean, did we just walk away from the brutality, violence? Do our families um, not perpetuate dysfunction and sickness um, stemming from that black Holocaust? Conversely, does for the white mind, expectation of privilege, um, ease of movement in this white system, created by, made for, administered by whites. Lot of so we walk through a lot of aspects, a lot of dimensions to see how things are past and present. Second huge thought is for financial literacy. Part of my personal efforts and personal goal is to acquire financial literacy. Reading a great book now. I would like you to get it as well, called The Creature from Jekyll Island. How money works, how it's created, when it's created. You know, what a fascinating education I'm getting. Stuff, of course, we should be the real fundamental, foundational stuff we should really have mastered in school, not how to be someone's employee. Although, you know, I'm sitting in the same classroom with my white counterparts, yet I'm having a different experience. You know, it's all about the white blue collar. It's all about, you know, because my models were my parents, both working a job and struggling to make it. My white counterparts, less of them were having their experience. More of them had maybe one parent working. I had a lot of blessings at home compared to my experience. Yet we're sitting in the same classroom. The expectation of my white counterparts is a lot different from my expectations. I was just conditioned and taught to receive, be passive, and hope for the best. My white counterparts, I'm sure, had much more self-determination, more volition, more conscious control over where they were going in life. Even though I may have had the same opportunities, of course, because America can't overtly close doors in my face. Uh, but as I move out into the world, I'm having a different experience from my white counterparts. That includes financial literacy. Yeah, it's amazing. Once I started getting more serious about that aspect, financial literacy, come to find out my white counterparts, they've mastered this. They've not been taught in school, but as me, they've been taught in their homes what it means, how to do it, where to put money, how money works, and just some of the basic fundamental ways beyond a bank account. You know, they understand financial terms in relation to real estate, investments, never spoken about. So, on a lot of the fronts that I trusted would help me understand, help me navigate these issues. Um, they they failed. Two of the biggest ones, home, the biggest one, where actually most education should occur, most important education, and school. But you've got taxpayers and investing huge amounts of money, and there are specific restrictions to bringing me enlightenment. I've got to in America. I've got to go to college, pay exorbitant fees to really get into some of the specific dynamics of this idea of financial literacy. Very sad. Very sad. And I think it makes the nation weak. So those are my two big issues. I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. I've read a couple of his works. We are in a Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask, finishing part 2 of dissecting the civil rights argument. Was it failure or success? Black labor, white wealth, search for power and economic justice, and Dr. Anderson's national plan to empower Black America. Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com and the Heritage Institute in Washington, D.C. Behind me, you'll see the hashtag #US2 symbol, and you'll find Black women supporting each other there. You can check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, for a kind of a Black Facebook experience. If you can't find your flavor, this is the World Wide Web. Start your own, just as I did. And finally, we occasionally take a look at fictional life of slaves in America, Uncle Tom's Cabin, by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Very excellent work. While it is fictional, I believe many of those experiences illustrated in her work have factual basis. All right, day 168, part 2, civil rights movement as injury. Just a quick review. We talked about the movement brought attention, put a spotlight on the plight of Black folks. We're taught water cannons, dogs, things like that. Gave it some shock value on the television sets of a white majority America. Not all white people are like, yeah, get the Black man. I mean, it really stirred. Like I say, my circle of white friends, my white mentors, they're not I don't picture them as racist people that enjoy and look forward to making black people vulnerable and making black people to distance black people from operating successfully within the white American framework. We talked about wealth gap growing, and with that, blacks hold less than 1% of the nation's wealth. I think hell, I mean, blacks at least as far as a percentage of the nation, I think we're at least up there like 12, between 12 and 15% of the nation are identify as black. You know, so us having less than 1%, that's not a good per capita rating there. Um, so move on. Dr. Anderson lists the civil rights movement as a failure, and some of the issues that it failed on, where it was imprecise. And I got to kind of be the devil's advocate here because it was brand new, and much like any new technology, something new, it's got to kind of go through some growing phases to see exactly how it fits. It's kind of the same way my approach to life. I might try something new, but I've got to kind of see it work. The Wright brothers, those guys, they were actually bicycle experts, but they had to start with little models and all that, and then it grew, and finally today we have jet planes and fighter planes and jumbo jets, you know. But they had to go through some growing pains. Same with the civil rights movement. So you know it didn't land where we wanted, but it was the seed. It was some initial experiments with getting black people in a position to participate equally in America. It didn't have a specific focus on redistributing um, wealth, which is really what we wanted. You know, we didn't want to just ride the bus where we wanted to sit where we want and have uh, short corporate doors open, but we're still just mopping floors and stuff. We wanted to participate unhindered, and in that participation, also glean a lot of the wealth that's being transferred back and forth in America. Our our our, our moral ground was too malleable, too shifted here and there. The wind was blowing us and everything. It's like when I found these little trees and shrubs. I used to do a lot of landscaping. I'd find, and underneath the mature trees and shrubs have these little saplings and stuff. And I'd be like, oh, well, I'll just take this out I'll take it out in the sunshine and it'll grow the same way. No, it's under there in the shade because it's a kind of nursery. None of that experiment survived. Um, it takes some coaxing, nursing, you know. Um, I have a note here in myself that Dr. Anderson doesn't uh, detail this explicitly, but remember the foundation, what the documents that make this nation what it is. It's constitutionally white. It's for whites, by whites, administered by whites. You know the mantra by now. Therefore, any we don't have any strict precedents for black power, black control, as far as it is displayed in the nation. The documents don't support uh, equal black participation. The black participation uh, comes from the legislation. We don't come on our own. If we had white skin, that wouldn't be an issue. But since the um, the documents declare and dole out freedoms and rights and things like that, as long as it's the source, and then as long as blacks are the recipient, then we really have we don't have any powerful support. Our feet are not grounded in the nation. Uh, it's in the documents. It's in the constitution of the nation. So we lack that. Um, we didn't glean the advantages, um, any of the momentum from the socioeconomic damages. We went through a Holocaust back then, black people, and I was born at the end of the 60s, so I missed slavery, Jim Crow, things like that. Racism came at me. It was beaten back behind closed doors. It couldn't openly show its face in America as I was coming up, but I was subject to it. Was the insidious, oblique nature of racism that I caught, you know. But there were socioeconomic damages that we didn't get. Um, we should have been fighting for that reparations, more of that language. Maybe should have been forwarded back then. Immigration and language to include other groups, women, disabled, things like that are still plaguing us, still crippling us. We're not pushing back at all against that because black people as a group are so, I don't know, so passive, spiritual on these points, and we're being annihilated by it through attrition. Well, so that's hurting us. We are displaced. We have no self-interest as a group and no focus. You know, we're very, as a nation, the whites are lethargic to share. They'll cry socialism quickly, and when they say that, well, socialism has lost its meaning. You know, it's used to browbeat. Socialism is simply all things in common administered by the government. Um, but it brings up, it's another failed paradigm, so to speak, and it's not what black people want. We don't want to have everything in common. We want our own, we want to earn our own, and we're not looking to steal. But at the same time, whites do have to come to that point where, like, they're sitting on wealth, generational wealth, derived from a lot of free labor and free land, um, from those early seminal time moments in America. 6 key points, and I'm sure there's more that Dr. Anderson points out at the end of this chapter. It's question 79 in a Black History Reader. Now, let's read the question exactly. It says, how did the 1960 civil rights movement benefit or injure blacks. That's the specific question. Now he ends this small section with 6 bullet points. The first point was that the Supreme Court confined the argument within a colorblind framework, which is false. We already have numerous precedents. It's not a colorblind framework because all Supreme Court decisions included colors. This idea that we are going to the Supreme Court and arguing for what rights and resources in a colorblind framework, that was a new precedent for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court traditionally, and all before this, has always recognized the color of a person's skin. So we allowed the Supreme Court to take some liberties, and when they gave their decisions and stuff, all in relations to amendments and things like that coming out of the Supreme Court. But before that, we got the Dred Scott decision, never been overturned. We've got specific language in the Constitution. That's where black skin is codified, things like that. So it's not a colorblind framework yet. The Supreme Court, dictated that this was the atmosphere in which all of this commotion was happening, when it was not. It was violently color aware of what was going on in the nation. Black leaders offered, he says, Dr. Anderson says black leaders offered patriotism in exchange for white approval, which is sad. We had Vietnam going on, and Dr. King did say some stuff about our men going over there, being killed and maimed, and coming back to a country that was not embracing them, giving them full inclusion. But that's kind of the one good thing about the military, is that it's those men and women that serve with one another. You start ducking and dodging bullets and bombs together. Your civil rights and racism, that goes out the window pretty quick. And I think that's across the board. In peacetime and on the homeland, you'll find it, but you'll find those who are distributed abroad, Hispanics, Asians, even Arabs, everybody that's serving in the U.S. military has a sense of kinship because it's serious. We don't see it in the military here in peacetime on the homeland, but those men and women deployed, there's not a whole lot of racism going on because they all need to be working together to survive. That makes it real, but so the black leaders weren't as assertive as maybe they could have been. Dr. King I know he was one outspoken voice, about our boys being killed over there. We lacked a national plan. That's what Dr. Anderson's whole book is about. National plan to empower Black America. And that's partly because this was new. We needed to get the weight off us. It's like recovering addict, recovering alcoholic. There's there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot to aspire to, a lot of plans to be made, but you got to remove that substance from the system. There's got to be some detoxification. There's a period. So this America was going just through such a new experience with even acknowledging the black plight in America. So there was a lot to go on. So, but you know, they needed to keep the ball rolling and move further into a national plan. We we had this parabolic arc. Man, we, sh- we should have moved on and gone through, but it was just so violent, deadly. Oh my God, and so messy that everybody, I think all parties, wanted a break, no matter where they landed. So that's what happened. No national plan. It granted uh, access to white institutions, white controlled spaces versus self-determinism. So civil rights, that's where the big piece of where civil rights has failed, because it makes it appear that all we wanted to do was go to white spaces and participate, when that's just another element of a failed aspect. What we wanted was to be able to self-determine as whites do, not go into white spaces and participate. I want to have my own space, my own house, and prosper, live peacefully, drug-free, violence-free, crime-free. You know, um, but got black people always moving towards them and not embracing their own potential to self-determine their lives. Um, Civil rights movement, the black overclass um, gave resistance to black success without white help. The black overclass has gotten a lot of, you look at black success, I'm guessing that there's probably a lot of white support there somewhere. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that. Even without that, I would say his idea, black overclass, you see it throughout Dr. Anderson's literature. It's just the affluent black people who are not so much in touch with the dregs and poverty-stricken black people there at the bottom. I even have to kind of check myself sometimes because I'm removed from myself. Now, it's hard to willingly put myself in that situation. So I get the black overclass, but like black people do as a group, we implode, and we don't see that we don't even see the necessity for Dr. Anderson's work, some of us, so um, I know what I've experienced, so it's kind of easy for me um, to connect with his message. But there are plenty of blacks that are like, whatever, I don't see it, I don't experience. Well, yeah, they're insulated. They don't, they stay away. Obama, our president, yeah, black president and all that, but he's not he's not in touch with, even if he was at one time, he's not in touch with black poverty, urgency of a message for black people to self-determine, to get reparations and things like that. Uh, Not when I see his daughters moving in high circles, dressed well, and stuff like that. That's I'm not saying go put on sackcloth and go be a pauper, but be realistic, you know, in how and who we identify with. I gotta admit, I don't identify. I Unfortunately for me, I associate depressed black communities with where to get drugs, where to expect crime and violence. You know, that's because of my experience and my ignorance and all that. So, but the black overclass, even more, blacks richer than me, gave resistance even then. And finally, the civil rights, it was that movement was still dependent on support from the white majority and corporate entities, you know, but they to pacify us, to quiet us. You know, even though it was our black movement, its success was still determined, by white influence, inclusion, and whatnot. Finish up with this. I'm a little over. Good news. At least we know civil rights. It did not work. It was an experiment. We know. Maybe it was the seed. We sprouted out of the seed, and now we're growing up, uh, and finally getting our legs under us, getting some branches and trees, and um, hopefully, the blacks collectively will have an awakening. Let me finish with Dr. Anderson's thought at the end of this section. Efforts of the black civil rights movement were laudable in many ways, but future efforts to make black America more self-sufficient and competitive must not make the same mistakes that we have listed here over the past 2 days. My name is Tomlins Nyback. That's day 168 out of the way. I'll see you tomorrow. Let's see what kind of trouble we can get into, or what kind of success we can get into. Put a positive spin on that. Come back tomorrow. Bye-bye.